I'm Allison Farrell with Daxco, and we are so excited that you've joined us for our lunch keynote today, presented by John Acuff. I'm going to hand it over to him just in a second, but I wanted to let you know a little bit more about him. If you've had the chance to hear him speak, he is absolutely amazing, and you are in for such a great session. He is a New York Times bestselling author of 6 books, including his most recent, Wall Street Journal's number one bestseller, Finish, Give Yourself the Gift of Done, which that sounds amazing right now. For over 20 years, he's helped some of the biggest brands in the world tell their story, including the Home Depot, Staples, and the Dave Ramsey team. Most recently, he's spoken to hundreds of thousands of people at conferences. So if you were part of 2019's NATO conference in Indianapolis, he did a great session there. He's featured regularly on national media and other key outlets. In addition, John is a big proponent of social media with blogs that have been read by 4 million people and almost 300,000 Twitter followers. In 2010, he used his influence with his tribe to build 2 kindergartens in Vietnam. John lives with his wife, Jenny, and 2 daughters in Franklin, Tennessee. And John, we are so excited you're joining us today. So thank you for being part of this event, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I wanted to start off by saying the murder hornets haven't been as bad as we were promised. I wanted to have a positive opener, and I feel like we can all agree that's a silver lining. No one watching this right now is suffering from a murder hornet invasion. None of their communities have been impacted, so that's positive. But it has been a weird year, and I think part of the challenge has been twofold. Number one, we don't know what's going to happen, and number two, we don't know when we'll know what's going to happen. There's been other times in my life when I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if I'd get into college, but I knew roughly when they'd tell me. I didn't know if I'd get a raise at work, but I knew roughly when they'd let me know that I got a raise. But right now, we don't know either of those things, and it can feel really intimidating. But I'm really encouraged because there's also a chance for us to learn. There's a chance for us to move beyond the pivot, to accelerate, if you will. And I think that we have to remember one thing. A crisis is a classroom. It's a chance for us to learn lessons we might not have learned on our own. It's a chance for us to figure out something that we might not have learned otherwise, to get stronger in our communities, to build new programs, to try new things, to grow in ways that are unexpected. And sometimes the thing that stands in front of that is this overwhelming feeling of change. It feels like there's 1,000 types of change that you have to deal with. But the good news is there's only 2 types of change. There's only 2 types you'll ever face. There's voluntary change and there's involuntary change. Now, a voluntary change is a change you make. It's a change you initiate, a change you cause. An involuntary change is a change that happens to you, a change that's outside of your control. Whenever I think about this line, I think about 2 different designers. One was a graphic designer in Dallas, Texas, who told me one day, John, I recognized when my industry was changing. I recognized that if I didn't change, I was going to become a dinosaur. So he made some voluntary changes. He went back to school. He plugged into an online design community. He learned some new coding, and he voluntarily changed his job. On the other end of the spectrum was an industrial designer my friend worked with. And his company came to him one day and said, we love your service. You've been with us for years, but we're going to start doing AutoCAD and changing what we do. And he said, but I'm better by hand. I can keep up. And for a minute he could, but eventually he lost that race with technology and he experienced a negative involuntary change. Now, the problem with this idea, the problem you should be thinking through right now is, well, that's way too simple because not every voluntary change is good. Not every involuntary is bad, right? We've all voluntarily made mistakes. We've all had friends voluntarily date idiots a lot longer than they should have. If you're thinking of somebody right now, don't elbow them and say, he's talking about Greg. He's great at Call of Duty, not so good at Call a Job. And we've all had good involuntary things happen to us as well. Some of you are part of the YMCA. Some of you are part of JCC in a way you never thought you would be. 10 years ago, if you thought you'd be here, you would have never guessed this. You experienced a positive change you didn't see coming. I always think about my friend Dave Barnes when I think about that. Dave Barnes is a musician here in Nashville where I live. The population of Nashville is 90% musicians, 10% bachelorette parties. That's kind of how it breaks down. In fact, wherever you're watching from, if you're worried that your bachelorette parties aren't in your city, don't worry, they're here in Nashville. They're safe. They're all wearing matching outfits, cowboy boots, jean shorts, cowboy hats, shirt that rhymes frisky and whiskey in some way. We should have pedal taverns just pick up at our airport. There's so many bachelorette parties here. But Dave Barnes is a musician. And a few years ago, he wrote a song for his wife called God Gave Me You. And it was a sweet little song. He put it on his album and it did okay. But then Blake Shelton, the country musician, the star of The Voice, heard the song and put it on his album and it went #1. And that's your whole goal as a songwriter, to get what's called a #1 cut, because it's a 6 or 7 figure payout. And it changed Dave Barnes' life. Now, if you said to him, Dave, how did you make Blake Shelton record your song? Do you think he'd say, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to get Blake Shelton's flight schedule. Then you try to guess what kind of rental car he would drive, probably an F-150 with those long, lanky country legs. Then you triangulate the radio signal in a geographic area so that when his key hits the ignition, your song comes out. Of course, he wouldn't say that. He experienced a good involuntary change, and so will you. So we have to add another line to this equation. And when we do that, it goes from negative to positive. And we see 4 different change moments that you're going to figure out, 4 moments that you're going to accelerate. Let's talk about that first one, that upper left-hand corner, a negative voluntary moment. That's just what's called a ceiling. That's when you get stuck, when you climb to the top of a ladder and there's nowhere else to go. 72% of Americans feel this way right now about their jobs. There's a lot of people that feel stuck in what they do, but they don't know what to do next. So they keep doing the same thing again and again. Scientists studied the week. The most depressing hour of the week for Americans is Sunday at noon. Why? Because it's the first day they can feel Monday coming. Saturday feels like the weekend. Sunday feels like pre-Monday if you're not engaged in work. Drink specials around the country are called Sunday scaries for Sunday night because people feel stuck and don't want to go back to work. But whole industries get stuck too. I spoke at a big event for orthodontists called the Orthodontic World Congress. You probably followed it online. And at the Orthodontic World Congress, I learned there's 3 things it takes to be successful in orthodontics: running a business, email marketing, and social media. Do you know what 3 things they don't teach at orthodontic school right now? Running a business, social media, and email marketing. They're going to get stuck. I read a great article in the New York Times that asked this question: why didn't Kodak create Instagram? Why didn't Polaroid create Instagram? Have you ever thought about that? Of all the companies in the world that understand our love of photography, how do you go bankrupt in an age where more people take more photos than ever before? I have 20,000 photos on my iPhone right now. How do they go bankrupt? What happened is that sometimes when you start something new, there's risk and innovation. But then when it goes well, you move from innovation mode to protection mode. You start to protect the thing that's already been built. You start to say things like, that's not how we do things here. Do you know what Kodak invested in during the digital revolution? Paper quality. At a time where people said, we're going to print less photos, they said, but what if they were really expensive photos? And they hit a ceiling. What about that bottom left-hand corner? A negative, unexpected moment. That's called a bump. When some part of life catches you off guard, a rogue wave runs into you. Sometimes it's your whole industry changes. In Nashville, 15 years ago, I watched every friend of mine who's a musician completely reinvent their career. You see, they used to do tours to sell albums. The point of the tour was to drive album sales, but then consumers said, nah, music's free now. Like, it's just free. Like, we just get it for free. And so every musician had to flip their whole model and say, okay, now we release an album for free and hope that you come to our tour. The tour is the last thing people will pay for. Nobody thinks they can go to an arena and tell a dude in a big black t-shirt, I'm just going to come in because I'm an entitled consumer. And then all of a sudden, every tour got put on pause. Every musician had to reinvent again. Nobody saw this coming. Lipstick sales right now are down 15%. Eye makeup is up 200%. Why? Because with masks, nobody can see your mouth. No one at Revlon a year ago thought, oh, I feel like in 2020, the mouth division is going to have a tough time. Like, I think mouths are going to be really down, but eyes, whew, eyes are going to be amazing. And it doesn't even have to be that big of a bump. Sometimes it's one key member from your team leaving can change your whole team. And they go to another city, they move somewhere, and it changes the whole community. And you go through a bump. What about on the positive side of things? When you do a positive voluntary decision, it's called a jump. When you jump towards something new, and maybe it's you reach out to a mentor, maybe it's you learn something new, maybe it's you reach out to somebody who's further down the road than you, maybe you start something new in your community, you jump towards something that's positive and voluntary. And the last one, a positive involuntary moment, is just an opportunity where something positive happens that you didn't see coming. My favorite one over the last few years was a CEO I talked to in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And I said, how'd you become the CEO of this credit union? And he said, well, I was a teller for 3 years. And then my manager above me got arrested for counterfeiting checks. So her job opened up. You think that was in his 5-year plan? First 3 years, crush it as a teller. Year 4, somebody does hard time. Of course not. I love when people tell me their 5-year plan or their 10-year plan. I think that is adorable. You think it's going to go exactly that way. The reality is you're going to go through all 4 of these. I mean, I wish today I could tell you, hey, If you do these 3 steps, you'll never have a ceiling. You'll never have a bump. But you can't even say that with a straight face in 2020, can you? Because we're all in the middle of a big bump right now. So what I learned is that it's not about avoiding them. It's about navigating them. If you really want to accelerate, you have to navigate change. And the people I studied, the leaders I worked with that were the best at doing that all had one thing in common. They have what I call a career savings account. And it's built off 4 really simple investments: relationships, skills, character, and hustle. Now, what's fun about those words is no one is surprised. No one right now is like, I worked at the YMCA, but I didn't know relationships were important. We like to keep people isolated. We don't want a community. We just like people isolated. No, of course relationships matter. No one right now is writing down, oh, skills matter. I had no idea. I've been focused on being unskilled. This is all making sense. But see, we all know these words, but a lot of times we haven't applied them all at the same time. And you need all 4. If you only have 2, if you only have 3 investments, the whole thing falls apart. Let's say you have tremendous relationships, tremendous skills, tremendous character, but no hustle. You know what happens? You become every NFL draft bust that had enough natural talent to get by in high school, enough natural talent to get by in college, but once they got to the NFL and wouldn't work hard, it all fell apart. I shared that idea with the NFL. I went and spoke to the NFL, and you could feel the room change when we talk about that. Let's say you have tremendous skills, tremendous character, tremendous hustle, but no relationships. Do you know what happens? You become the emperor with new clothing. You become the type of leader that can only hear the things they want to hear. We've worked with leaders like that, right? And here's what I've learned. Leaders who can't be questioned always end up doing something questionable. Leaders who can't be questioned always end up doing questionable things. Show me a church that fell, show me a team that fell, show me a business that fell, and I'll show you a leader who is isolated. We need all 4 of those investments. And once you realize that, you start to notice that one of them will help you in each change moment. Let's look at that first one. When you go through a ceiling, do you know what you need? You need skills. And here's why. It's impossible to get stuck somewhere old if you keep learning something new. Skills are the hammer that helps you break through a ceiling. That's why those orthodontists were at that event. They recognized they no longer got a free pass on the internet. 10 years ago, customers would say, it's fine for the orthodontic website to just be a single page, awkward picture of a teenager wearing headgear, 2 dolphins jumping in the shape of a heart with your address. But now consumer expectation is different. Now they say, okay, we want video reviews, we want testimonials, we want to get text reminders about our appointment. What's crazy is people will judge your apps based on the best app they've ever used, not other apps that are similar. People go, well, if Uber can do it, why is this app complicated? Consumer expectation has changed, so we have to learn new skills or we get stuck. What about when you go through a bump? That's when you need your relationships. If you want to figure out who your friends are, go through a negative, unexpected moment. And what you learn is that sometimes the people you thought would show up first, the people that would run to the fire, disappear. But then people you didn't even know knew you existed show up out of nowhere to link arms with you and say, we're going to get through this. People stay with the YMCA. People stay with the JCC, not because of those names, because of the people. There's a connection to the person at the front desk. There's a connection to the person that does the spin class. There's connections. People stay with people. You're going to get through this bump moment because of the strength of your relationships. What about when you jump, when you try something new? That's when you need your character. Why? Because when you try something new, your skills might not be there yet. Your relationships might not be there yet. But when you jump with who you are. You jump with your integrity and your generosity and your loyalty. You always bring you with you on a jump. We know this happens in other parts of life. Did you know up to 80% of people from mainland US who moved to Hawaii moved back within the first year? Up to 80%. Why? Because they thought the problems they had in Ohio wouldn't find them in Hawaii. They thought, as soon as I have more access to macadamia nuts, like as soon as I'm around more pineapple, all my problems will go away. And they get to Kona and they unpack their boxes and all those same character issues are there too. When you jump with who you are. And that last one, when you get an opportunity, that's when you need to hustle. You need to figure out, okay, I've got this slim little window. How do I hustle? How do I grow it? How do I accelerate it? So I got really curious about that because it's so simple, right? When you think through what everything is, you go, okay, you do these 4 things in these 4 moments. So the question goes, why don't people actually do that? Why don't people finish? Why don't they have these big goals? They have these big hopes. We're in the middle of the month where people start to think about their new year and their new goals. Why don't people finish? And I got curious about that question. I started to research it. And one thing you find is 92% of all New Year's resolutions fail. 92%. University of Scranton did a study on that. And you just thought of The Office, by the way. Every time I say University of Scranton, I can see people's faces go, Michael Scott probably led that study. It's actually a real university and they studied it. You have a greater shot at getting into Juilliard to become a professional ballerina, which is an 8.6% chance, tiny dancer, than you do at finishing a resolution. And we've all been there, right? I mean, we've all seen fitness resolutions go sideways. For me, it was P90X. I did the P90X DVD system, and it's taken me 3 years to do 6 days of P90X. And that is not the schedule I recommend. But you know how it happens. You see the commercial and you're like, I'm going to get so excited. I'm going to get jacked in my kitchen. I'm going to be doing burpees in my living room. And then the first 5 days are really hard. But then you see yoga on the schedule. And like, I can do yoga. Like that's the 50% candles. I can do yoga. And then you try yoga, and yoga is really challenging. If you want to buy a Peloton, just wait until the spring. There are going to be pandemic Pelotons for sale online. Like you're going to see that because we have these resolutions, and there's a problem. All this starting and then not finishing costs us. Scientists call it the Z effect. You remember incomplete goals more than you do completed ones. There's a residue, there's a weight. You've had that. You ever gone to bed and you tell your brain, okay, it's time to go to sleep, and your brain goes, what if instead we thought about things you failed at 3 years ago? Bing! And you wake up. If you don't want to sleep tonight, scroll through your email right before bed. Look at all the stuff I didn't get to today. Oh, this is like digital melatonin, peaceful. Another way to say it is the goals you don't finish don't disappear. They become these ghosts that haunt you. And so I got curious about that. And so I went to the University of Memphis and I commissioned a research study with a PhD named Mike Peasley. And we looked at 900 people as they worked on their goals, personal goals, financial goals, health goals, career goals, so that we can answer the question, can you go from being a chronic starter into a consistent finisher? And can you invest in those investments I talked about? So here's what we found. The first one, skills. Here's how I define that. Skills are just the bridge between amateur and expert. And right now in the season you're in, there's 3 skills that are going to help you pivot. There's critical skills, new skills, and classic skills. Those are the 3 skills that in the middle of this season, it's December, we're headed toward a new year. What are the skills you need, especially in this weirdo year? Those are the skills. Let's talk about each one. A critical skill, here's how I define that. What's your takeout sign? Every restaurant in America, their number 1 critical skill this year was to print a sign that said, we do takeout. That was the number 1 most critical thing. And every business, every organization, every team has a set of critical skills. So as you look at your team, as you look at your why, as you look at your JCC, what's critical? Do you need to transition some things? Is there something on fire? On your list of things you're working on, what's actually critical? I spoke to an executive and he said, our critical skill was we had to transition a call center to home. We didn't have laptops for these people. So all of a sudden we realized we don't even have the right equipment to bring people home. That was a critical skill. So look at your business, look at your team and say, okay, in my community, what's critical? The second thing is new skills. Here's how I think about that. Today is someday. You know those skills you told yourself, someday when things slow down, someday when things get put on pause, someday I'm going to blank. What was that skill? Because today is someday. Right now, we're all in the middle of someday. A different way to say it is this. What would have made this season easier? For your team, for your location, what would have made this season easier? Ask that question and then go build that. A year from now, when we do another event, and I hope it's live, what will you say? Okay, I built this thing because I knew it would have made things easier. Maybe you'd say, you know what? Having a good work from home plan would have made things easier. You know what? Having an easier way to communicate with all our members in multiple ways would have made things easier. You know what? Doing a more deliberate communication system would have made things easier. Maybe being better at Zoom. A lot of teams didn't have a Zoom strategy, and all of a sudden it was like a flip got switched and said, hey, by the way, you're expected to be an expert at Zoom. So good luck with Zoom. For me, when I asked that question, the answer was obvious. What would have made this year easier for me was having a YouTube channel. It would have. I'm a live event speaker. Guess what hasn't happened this year? Live events. And so if I had a YouTube channel, I would have had another way to communicate with clients. I would have had another way to share information, another revenue stream. I would have had a studio set up. So guess what I started working on in March? A YouTube channel. I said, okay, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to figure this out. And so I've created hundreds of videos, and it's given me a chance to build something new, a new skill. The last skill is a classic skill. What's a classic skill for you? I think about it like this. Use the phone as a phone. People are going to answer your call more than they did a year ago. People that you need to connect with will pick up their phone because we're all isolated. So what's a skill that as you grew, as your community got bigger, It was a skill that you used to use, and then all of a sudden you kind of put it to the side, and now it's time to dust it back off and say, okay, you know what? We used to be really good at blank. You know what? We used to put a lot of time into blank. What if we did that again? How do we use that? So as you think about skills and you think about how do I invest in them, think through those 3 questions. Number 1, what's a critical skill? Number 2, what's a new skill? And number 3, what's a classic skill? Now, what about relationships? Because that's a big part of what you do. Here's how I define that. Relationships are just everyone else who is on this adventure with you, because we are on an adventure. There's a lot of unknown. I got to sit in some of the breakouts before this session, and there's so much unknown, and it's so challenging to watch membership numbers and changes and think, okay, well, when will this have an end? I think part of us, we need to stop saying the phrase, when this is over, because I think that can be demoralizing. I've been saying that for months and months and months, and I keep moving the deadline. And so I think we need to pause that and go, okay, I can't know. I don't know, but I do know I can invest in relationships. So how do we do that in the midst of all of this? Well, I think one really simple thing we can do is care about what the people we care about care about. Care about what the people you care about care about. I actually learned that lesson from a chimney sweep. Now, I don't know if you knew they have these, but they have huge chimney sweep events, and sometimes they invite me to speak there. And the first one I did, and this is true, this isn't shtick, I promise. They said before I got there, whatever you do, do not mention Mary Poppins. And that was great feedback for me, because I thought she was like their LeBron James, but they are chimneyed out. They want no part of Mary Poppins. But I go to this chimney sweep event, and I meet this chimney sweep named Joe. And Joe tells me, John, I was struggling with my business. I'm trying to connect with my community, and a big part of my business is I do annual cleanings. I clean your chimney once a year to make sure it doesn't catch on fire. We're design flaw, by the way, for a chimney whose only job is to hold fire, but I'm not here to denigrate the chimney industry. But he said, John, no one would think about getting their chimney cleaned. I'd send them direct mail and email and text messages, and they wouldn't think about it. And that's true of every business, every organization, whether you're nonprofit or for-profit. No one right now is thinking about you. It's our job to think about them. No one right now, none of your members are going, I can't wait to see what they learn and accelerate. Like today on this Wednesday, I was thinking about it. It's our job to think about them. It's our job to create new things for them. And so Joe said, I decided to care about what the people I care about. And I recognized that for some reason, a lot of my customers had dogs. There were a lot of dog owners in my customers. And so I decided if I was at somebody's house and the dog was out, the dog was friendly, I was going to pet the dog. I was like, ask what the dog's name is. And then I was going to take a picture of the dog. And I was going to take that picture. And on my phone, I have an app that turns photos into postcards. And so the day after my visit, I would send them a picture of their dog. He said, John, do you know where dog owners put pictures of their dogs when you send them one? If we were live right now, you'd all be shouting, the fridge. And it's true. And that's what they would do. And in the corner would be the dog's name, the chimney sweep's name, his URL, and the date of their next appointment. So John, do you know how many other chimney ads I've sent people that they put on the fridge? Nobody does that. Nobody's like, oh, chimney times is here, clear. The kids report cards. I'm into chimneys. My daddy was a chimney man. I'm a chimney man. Ooh, what are they going to do? Pointed flat, so many options. It changed his business having a little bit of empathy. So the question you have to ask is, what do the people you care about care about? What do they actually care about? When you think about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to grow, what do they care about? And I know this is a question you're already asking, because when I talked to the team at DAXCO, they told me so many amazing stories. They told me stories about the YMCA creating emergency childcare. To say, hey, okay, we're going to have emergency childcare for frontline healthcare workers, because we know they care about that. We know that in the middle of a health crisis, a nurse, a doctor, a physician doesn't get to say, I'll just have my 4-year-old figure it out. They can I'll get them a Lunchable and a TV. They can just kind of Peppa Pig the day away. I'll go save lives. The YMCA put that together. I know you're answering this question because the JCC did a drive-through food bank. They said, okay, we can't do business as normal, but what do people care about? They care about hunger. They care about making sure their kids get fed. They care about their community. So we'll do a drive-through food bank. So you've got to ask that question. What are the people you care about? And why is this so important right now? Because crisis magnifies kindness. The little things you do for your community are worth 100 times what they were a year ago, because we're so isolated. That's something I just keep running into. I've talked to 40 different communities over the last year doing virtual events. And one of the few things they all have in common is companies keep telling me our people are stuck. Our people are sad. Our people feel lonely. They feel isolated. And we're not even in winter yet. I had a huge Fortune 500 company say, we're worried about winter because we've got isolated people and there's going to be less sunshine. We need community. What do we do? And crisis magnifies kindness. When you do something small right now, it's worth 100 times what it used to be. I was reminded of this the other day. I went on a trail run, and it was a big enough trail that I could be socially distanced. And I saw somebody walk by me, this elderly gentleman. I had seen him the day before. And this time when he walked by, he gave me a double thumbs up. And that made my day. I told my wife about it when I got home. I'm telling you about it. A year ago, I might have been like, who does double thumbs up? It feels like extravagant. It's too much thumbs. Like one thumb is enough. Now, because we're isolated, a neighbor waving, somebody remembering your name matters to you. It's important. So the question should then become, well, how do we know what people care about? In this season, how do we know? And here's a really simple way. Read less minds, ask more questions. Read less minds, ask more questions. Have you ever had a team meeting where you create something new and you spend a few hours on it, and then at the end of the day, somebody raises their hand and goes, did we ask any members if they want this thing? And you're like, no, why would we do that? Let's just spend a lot of time, a lot of money, launch it and be surprised nobody signs up for it. What if you could get ahead of that and actually meet the need? What I've learned over the years is it's much better to meet a need than it is to invent a need. It's expensive and time consuming to invent the need. It's so much easier to meet a need that's already happening in your community. I learned that lesson on a big scale working for Bose. Bose makes stereos and headphone equipment in Framingham, Massachusetts. And one year we had a new system for gigging musicians. So imagine the musician going from smoky bar to smoky bar, and we had a problem. The problem was those musicians either didn't know who we were or they knew who we were and didn't like us. They said, you're Fender, you're not cool, like my brands are better than that, you're boring, you're classical, you're sterile. And we could have pretended to know them. As a dad of teenage daughters, it's tempting to just Google some popular phrases and try to say them casually in sentences like, what's the deal with Lady Jaja? She's still fat? I get it, I'm lit. Savage, what? Like you can pretend or you can actually get in the trenches with the people you're serving. Unfortunately, that's what we did. We started something called Bose Bandcamp. And we had musicians test the gear and use the gear and tell us what worked and what didn't. And we learned things we never could have guessed. That's the amazing things. When you get plugged into a community and hear real stories, you'll learn things you never could have guessed on your own. My favorite thing, we had a musician say, hey, will you please not put the name Bose on the bag that the gear comes in? Would you please not put the word Bose on it? And we were going to put it in like 1,000-point font, like Bose. We said, why wouldn't we do that? And he said, well, when you do that, people at the airport and people at nightclubs know my gear is expensive and they steal it. So you can put the name on there. I'm just going to do what I always do, which is cover it with tape, or you can just meet my need. We had geniuses working at Bose. I mean, Bose was founded by Dr. Bose, an acoustical engineering professor from MIT, but we never would have guessed that. There were other times where we missed it when we didn't ask the right questions. We had a huge head start in the luxury headphone division. The reason why is we had a headphone system for pilots. Decades ago, we had an amazing system for pilots that somebody said, could we adapt this to a consumer model? Do you think consumers would spend $300, $400, $500 on a fancy pair of headphones? We're used to that now, but 20 years ago, nobody was doing that. So Bose had a head start because we had a headphone system for pilots, but then consumers started to change what they wanted. They started to say things like, hey, we love the sound quality, but the color matters to us, how they look. Sometimes we wear headphones to match our shoes. Sometimes it's part of our outfit. We want new designs and new colors, and we ignored that. You know who didn't ignore that? Dr. Dre and Beats. And they ate our lunch in a multi-billion-dollar industry. We broke the first rule of electronics. We forgot about Dre. And our attitude was kind of like, what do you mean we don't have colors? We have colors, dark gray, off gray, light gray, here are your colors. And we missed it. And you'll miss the people you're serving too, unless you're engaged in conversations, unless you're listening. You've got to do that right now. And here's what I know. When you ask somebody what they need, they become visible and valuable. When you ask somebody what they need, they become visible and valuable. That's what everyone in every community you're serving right now wants to know. Do you see me? Do I matter? Do you see me? Do I matter? That's how we strengthen relationships in a time where we need to pivot. So what about on the character side? How do we invest in that? Well, character is just who you are. Theologians, philosophers have argued it for years. It's just ultimately who you are. And I could talk about a million facets of character, right? We could talk about, generosity, loyalty, honesty, but I think the one that matters most right now for us is resilience. We all need resilience. And resilience is just forward motion despite the absence of courage, comfort, and clarity. You wouldn't need resilience if you had those things. If you were the bravest person in the world, you wouldn't need resilience. If you had perfect clarity, if you knew exactly how 2021 was going to go, you wouldn't need resilience. If things were comfortable right now, you wouldn't need resilience, but they're not, especially in the bravery front. I keep learning lessons about bravery. One of the biggest ones I've learned in this season is this: bravery is a choice, not a feeling. It's a choice. I can't wait for it to show up for me to become brave. Have you had any of those sleepless nights yet where you look at the alarm clock and you give your body like a countdown? You go, hey, if we fall asleep right this minute, we can still carry the 7 hours of sleep. So as soon as I close my eyes, it's go time, like go to sleep. So close your eyes, you're tense for like 10 minutes. And you look back over the clock and you go, okay, see, I'm serious this time. When we go to bed at right this second, we can still get 6 hours and 50 minutes. Like we can do that. And you just keep going all the way down. There's moments where you're just going to have to choose to be brave for your community, for the people you care about. And I saw a picture once that reminded me of this. I was walking to stage at an event and I saw something on the ground. To one way was the stage. The other way was the exit. And I feel like that captures bravery. Now, you might not stand on a physical stage. You might not have that exact moment, but every day you get a choice. Will I choose the stage or will I choose the exit? Will I choose the stage in this conversation? Will I choose to learn the new thing? Will I choose to go this direction or will I take the exit? Will I hide? Will I numb? Will I escape? Will I choose the stage? And what I know about resilience is this: resilience is directly tied to purpose. It's easier to have resilience when you're clear on your purpose. Another way to say it is the bigger your purpose, the bigger your resilience. So I think an important question that you can ask this season right now is, who are you doing this very difficult job for? Who are you doing this very difficult job for? Because it is difficult. And sometimes we forget the individuals we're doing it for. I love to ask this question. I asked a room full of CEOs who run hospitals, who are you doing this difficult job for? And one said, it is a difficult job. And she kind of explained it to me, because if you're the CEO of a hospital, you don't get to say phrases that most of us get to say. Most of us get to say, it's not brain surgery. It's not life or death. If you're the CEO of a hospital, it is brain surgery and it is life or death. And their range of responsibilities goes from saving someone's life to people are mad it's Pepsi in the vending machine. Like that's the scope of their engagement. And she said, I do this job, this difficult job, for the donor walk. And I said, well, what's a donor walk? I'm not familiar. And she said, well, whenever somebody donates an organ, everybody lines the hall, the administrators, the doctors, the nurses, and we all clap. We cheer as they're wheeled to surgery. She said, that's the donor walk. That's why I do it. I've asked teachers this question this season. I say, well, who are you doing this difficult job for? Because it is difficult. They weren't expecting to be virtual. It's challenging to be a teacher right now. And they'll say, I'm doing it for the me I used to be. I was a 13-year-old and my parents went through a divorce and nobody recognized that my entire personality changed. Everything about me changed. So I'm doing it so that me, that's the future, won't be left alone. I'm doing it to show up for the 13-year-old, the 14-year-old, the me I used to be. That's who I do this job for. And I know you're asking this question because when I toured the YMCA that's right down the street from me on Concord Road in Brentwood, I asked that question and they told me about Judd. I shared his story in Indianapolis. He's 83 years old and he helps run the skate park. Can we both just admit there's a chance Judd didn't grow up skateboarding? Like, I don't know that 70 years ago when he was a teenager, they had skateboards. I'm not sure how that works, but I know Judd doesn't care about skateboarding. He cares about teenagers. And they had story after story where Judd showed up in a kid's life. I mean, one of my favorite ones was they said Judd was there on a Saturday and there was a 13-year-old who came in and his parents had just gotten divorced. And he told Judd, it's my fault. And Judd got to jump into that conversation and say, no, it's not. Because kids are picking up stories that they're going to believe for a long, long time, unless people at the YMCA, people at the JCC jump in and go, whoa, 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 whoa. No, that's a lie. That's a lie. Don't carry that one. That's not true. This divorce doesn't have anything to do with you. I know you're asking that question. Who are you doing this difficult job for? That's how we build resilience. The last one, hustle. Hustle is just an act of focus, not frenzy. It's not just going. It's not burning out. That's not hustle. Hustle is saying, these are the things that matter. Here's how we stay connected to them. And one of my favorite things we learned during the research for Finish, as we wrote a book about that, was that if you want to get something done, you've got to make it fun. Fun matters, especially in a season like this when it's really hard to figure out how to do it. You see, most people don't assume that a goal will be fun. If you ask the average person, name 5 words you think of when you think of the word goal. They go, grind, sacrifice, discipline. They name all these difficult, challenging words. Most people don't say fun. They don't say enjoyment. They don't say laughter. They don't say community. They don't say fulfillment. Even in our weekend activities, we don't always have fun. One of the fastest growing sports in America right now are adventure races. If you've never been to one, imagine like a half marathon and an obstacle course combined. And there's people that love them. I have friends that love them. It's things like the Spartan race, the Tough Mudder, the Muddy Buddy, the Warrior Dash. I think they're awesome. I just think it's interesting that one of the activities in the Tough Mudder is you get electrocuted. That's one of the activities. Now, most days of your life, there's this part of your brain that's like, I hope a live wire doesn't touch my body today. On Tough Mudder Day, you pay a person for that experience. This is after you've jumped into a dumpster full of ice water and swum under a wall. Now, the wall is there to make sure you go all the way under and you're submerged long enough that your brain kind of freezes and you lose synaptic control to your limbs. Then you get to crawl through the live wire field, but they're not all live because where would the surprise be in that, right? Don't you want a little bit of surprise? And my friend Dino did the Tough Mudder because if your name is Dino, the state makes you do adventure races. A lot of people don't know that. I said, Dino, what was it like? And he said, well, I was crawling through and I was soaking wet. And I said, I think that's good for electricity. If you're going to be around electricity, step one, get soaking wet, but go on. And he said, right at the last second, I'd almost made it through. I felt a live wire lightly graze me between my shoulder blades. And it felt like a giant with a hammer for a hand punched me as hard as he could into the core of the earth. And I said, Dino, the t-shirt you get better be amazing. And we do that on purpose. You've seen people at your facilities think they have to do an activity they don't like because that's what counts. You've seen people say, I want to get in shape. And you go, great, we have a million programs. They go, I'm going to run. I'm going to run. You go, do you like running? They go, no, I hate it. That's how I know it's good for me. And you go, we have dancing. They're like, no, that seems too fun, too enjoyable. And so I wanted to study this because even in our businesses, even in our nonprofits, we don't think fun matters. One of the most popular form of goal settings in the last 50 years is this. SMART goals. We've all seen these, right? Make your goals specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. I think this is helpful. I really do. I think this is a good system. I just think it's incomplete because which of these words is remotely related to joy or remotely related to fun? What, time bound? Hey, how was vacation? It was amazing. I knew when it was going to end. It was time bound. That was my favorite part. So I wanted to be able to go into teams, go into companies and say, hey, fun matters. Because I go to all these organizations and they go, we're a serious organization. We don't do whimsy. We're not Google. That's who they always use as an example. They go, we're not Google. We don't have ponies in the lobby and like slides instead of stairs and like cotton candy fights. Fun doesn't matter. I wanted to be able to say that I get that. But if you'll add some joy, if you'll add some engagement, if you'll add some fun to your community, people will feel more connected. They'll perform better. They'll be happier in the long run. And so we studied that. Now, when you study leadership principles and goal principles, there's two things you look at: satisfaction and performance. Satisfaction is how did you feel during the goal? How did you feel during the challenge? Performance is how did you do? How did you actually end up performing? Now, any principle, whether it's mine or the next keynote or anything you ever read, has to raise both. And here's why. Let's say I help you with your satisfaction. Like it's really, really satisfying, but I don't help you with your performance. You end up smiling all the way to last place. You go, this is really fun. I mean, we're failing, but it's really fun. Let's say I help you with your performance. Like you crush your performance, but you never raise your satisfaction. Do you know what happens? You become every rich, miserable person you've ever met. Have you ever met somebody who's really successful and really unhappy? You know why that happens? Because they only cared about their performance. They never thought about their satisfaction. Or they thought, you know what? My plan for life is I'm going to spend 6 decades at a job I hate, but then I'm going to move to Florida. I'm going to go down to 30A and get a golf cart, and then everything will change. Like that's a lot of pressure on a golf cart. Like you're going to practice misery for 6 decades and then think you were tired of Palm Springs and the whole thing changes. You've got to do both of those. So we asked the people in this study, we said, we want you to raise what you're doing. And we want you to raise your satisfaction and performance. And we think the path is to add some fun to your goal. And here's what happened. The people that added fun were 31% more satisfied, but the crazy stat is they're 46% better performers. Now you should be arguing with this idea. Right now you should be thinking, well, does that always work? You should be thinking some form of this statement. Let's be honest, kale isn't fun, right? Every goal has some parts of it that are difficult. Every goal has some challenges that aren't easy. There are parts of your job right now that aren't inherently fun. Maybe for you, it's budgeting. I rarely meet somebody who goes, My favorite time of year is budget season, where I have to kind of figure out my budget for the entire year. Oh, I sleep like a baby. It's the best. I have to kind of guess what we're going to need money-wise, and then I'm held accountable to that for the whole year, and I have to be a fortune teller. Oh, it's just my favorite. Your job has hard parts. Every job does. I think we've done this next generation a great disservice by saying, always follow your heart, always follow your passion, because it gets interpreted as the minute it's not fun or passionate, it must be the wrong thing. And I'm not one of these speakers that's like, oh, every millennial is lazy and entitled. I don't think that's true for a second. I know some amazing millennials. Whenever a boomer CEO tells me millennials are lazy and entitled, I think we should talk to the people that raised them. Oh, wait, that's you. Like the call is coming from inside the house. But I think we need to be honest and say every job is going to be challenging. Every goal is going to be challenging. We're in the middle of a challenging year. So it's not about having fun. It's about making it fun. And there's two ways to do that. You can add reward or fear. Those are the two ways, reward or fear. And that word fear is challenging. So let's break that one down first. When I say fear, I mean consequence. That's what I mean. If you ever got something done on a Thursday because you had a Friday deadline, you experienced a positive consequence motivation. You knew, okay, I've got a Friday deadline. I better get this done. Now, great financial planners use this model all the time. A great financial planner will read you and understand, okay, you're a reward person. So that means I need to pitch the reward. So what they do is they say, hey, if you get your money in order, you're going to be able to retire early. If you get your money in order, if you save, if you do your 401k, you'll get an RV and you can drive around the country with your spouse. If they know you're fear-based, they say the opposite. They go, hey, if you don't get your money in order, it's going to be really difficult to retire. If you don't, you're never going to be able to pay for college for your kids. Same with doctors. A doctor who wants you to get in shape that knows you will read that your reward or consequence. And they'll say, okay, if your reward, they'll say something like, hey, when you lose a few pounds, you'll feel so much better. You'll sleep so much different. It'll be so easy to travel. If they know you're consequence-based, they paint the opposite picture. They go, if you don't get your cholesterol under control, if you don't work on this, you're going to develop the same health issues your mom had. So your job is to figure out, as I look at this year, as I look at these goals, the things I need to hustle on, do I need to add a little bit of reward or a little bit of consequence? And it doesn't have to be massive. It can be something small. I mean, maybe the consequence is you ask somebody to hold you accountable. You have somebody that you trust that you say, hey, we're doing some new things at the YMCA and I'm struggling with them. So can I give you an update once a week? Will you check in with me once a week so that I have some more visibility to that? Will you help me with that? What does that look like? Can you watch that? I had a friend raise the stakes even higher. He hired a business coach and his business coach knew he was consequence-based and said, hey, every time you miss a goal, I want you to give me a signed check from you, signed check for $100. And every time you miss one, I'm going to mail the politician you hate the most some of your money. You better believe that motivated my friend, because every time he thought about missing that, the business coach would go, they're going to do such terrible things with your money. Like, oh, it's going to be the worst. And he was motivated. Sometimes the reward can be small too. It doesn't have to be massive. It can be, you get to go somewhere by yourself. Back when movies were open, I used to say, you get to go to a movie alone, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a parent, going to a movie alone without your kids is the greatest suburban luxury known to mankind. You walk in, you're like, take it for one. I don't even have to use the bathroom like 7 times or like answer questions. Like, this is amazing. It doesn't have to be massive. I'll show you one example of how I did this in my own life. So about 2 years ago, I step off stage at a big event and a woman comes up to me and says, I really like following you online. You're really funny and tall. She said the first word, not the second. If we were live right now, you'd be like, I don't feel like he's tall, but maybe this room adds a lot of height. But she said, I really like following you on Instagram. And then she said something that shocked me. She said, I didn't know you wrote a book. And that was a punch in the stomach because that's my job. I've written 6 books. I've got a 7th coming out in the spring. That was her saying, you don't talk about what you do. And then I realized every event planner, the first thing they do when they think about booking me to speak is they go to my Instagram page, they go to my social media. And if you looked at my social media account, it was mostly just jokes about queso and pictures of dogs I wanted to pet, which is every dog roughly. And I realized, wait a second, I need to change that. But I'm not naturally good at social media. Some of you might not be either. Right now, like, don't you love when you go to an event and they go, just have your web team do it. And you go, oh, the web team, boop, boop, that's me. Or they go like, have your whole marketing department do it. And you're like, oh, that's this corner of my office. That's where I do the marketing department. I'm not naturally good at social media. So I went to the most honest person I know, my 17-year-old daughter. And I said, hey, am I good at social media? Am I good at Instagram? She said, you use it like an old man. And I said, well, you're hired and you're also grounded. It was a confusing day for her, but at least she didn't say, okay, boomer. But she said, Dad, take for instance, your bio. I'll show you what she did to my bio on Instagram. It was just a small change. She said, Dad, your bio is a paragraph. It's so boring. Nobody has time to read a paragraph. And I said, it's 3 sentences. She said, we're a very busy generation. She said, it needs emojis and hyperlinks and bullet points. I said, I don't know what some of those words mean. And so she changed my bio. And if you go to my account, it's just at John Acuff. You'll see that I'm really deliberate about my account right now. And why did I add my daughter to that? Because it was fun. As a dad of teenage daughters, I'm constantly looking for ways to connect with them. I'm in the part of parenting where a shift has happened. There used to be this part where I would come home and they would run down the lawn toward me. And now I'm in the years where I come home and I go find them. I'm the one who runs to find them because they're in a room listening to AirPods doing virtual school, and I go find them. And so I'm constantly looking for ways for us to connect. And I knew that, okay, I'm not naturally called to Instagram, but if I had my daughter, that'll be a lot of fun. That'll be a reward for me. So you get creative with it. Now, this is close to my heart, this whole concept about building these investments, because a few years ago, I hired a coach to help me. I hired a business coach to review what I did. And she spent a couple of weeks on my stuff. Then she came back and this is what she said. She said, John, you're what I call accidentally successful. And that is not a compliment. Like the last word is pretty nice, but accidentally kind of ruins it. And she basically said, John, you've got some charisma, you're funny, but they're not being on purpose. You're not being deliberate. It's all accidental and it's not repeatable. It's not scalable. You can't grow it. And here's what I know about this season. There won't be great teams that get to be accidental. We have to be on purpose. And here's the thing, you were meant to do more than float. You are. Your community needs you more than that. They need you. There are families that need you. They need you to invest in those 4 things: relationship, skills, character, and hustle. Those are the things that build a career savings account. Now, normally, if this was a live event, I'd get to go to the back of the room and tell you about something I'm working on or show you my new book. But because it's virtual, I don't get to do that. So I wanted to create something that you could use virtually. So here's a way to get the next chapter of my next book. All you have to do is text soundtracks to 44222. I wrote a book about overthinking. The PhD who helped me finish, we asked 10,000 people if they ever struggle with overthinking, and 99.5% of people said yes. So we did a massive research study to say, okay, how do you change overthinking from a super problem into a superpower? And this was before the year we've had. There's some people in your community, some people in your team, some people maybe in your seat that have been overthinking this year. So if you want a first chapter of it, just text soundtracks to 44222. I'm so honored that I get to do this. I was so honored that I got to speak in Indianapolis at NATO. I love the work the YMCA does. My community is better for that. I love the work that JCC does. My community is better for that. And I love that DAXCO invests in you and says, hey, we want to encourage, we want to equip, we want to create breakouts and keynotes where we get to slingshot the people we're serving into 2021. So thank you so much for letting me share a few ideas on what it takes to move beyond the pivot. I can't wait to see what you do with them.
Thank you so much, John. That was such a great presentation, and I was laughing and typing things as you were going. There's so many good things in there. I put in the chat that we've got a few minutes for Q&A. So audience, definitely, if you have a question for John, you wanna ask him about something, then type that into the Q&A, and I will moderate through those. So we'll give you just a minute to chat in and Linda asks if you could put the text link again for the book, if you could pop that back up.
Oh yeah. Let me see. Is it up right now? Yeah. Yep. It's I could actually put it in the chat too. Would that be easier? It's 44222 and the word soundtracks.
Perfect. And we'll put that on the live feed as well.
Great.
So we've got a great question. What are some more examples of creating fun in projects that you've seen?
So I think one of the key things where it gets really powerful is when you help other people figure out what theirs are. So if you work with other people, one of the most powerful things you can do is motivate them with the form of motivation that helps them the most. And the best way to do that is interview them about a win. Ask them, tell me about a situation where it really worked. What was present? What was going on? You see, we kind of forget our wins. We forget the things that happen. So I meet all the time that'll go, people say, I'm trying to lose weight. It's really struggling. I'm struggling. I'll go, well, tell me about a goal that worked. And they'll go, oh, I got my finances in order. And I'll say, well, what was present? And they'll say, I had a team. I was, going to a community group talking about it. I read a book. I had an app. And they won't bring any of those good things forward into the new goal. So a lot of times what you do is you sit down with somebody that you're trying to help and go, okay, tell me about a time you won. And when they say, these are the three things that helped, you bring them forward and say, okay, well, let's bring these up. What's fun? I'll never forget. I worked at Auto Trader in Atlanta. And one year they gave us tiny orange iPod shuffles, the ones that were square. And I remember a coworker said, ugh, I hate this color. And I thought, wow, you're so entitled. They gave us an orange iPod shuffle. She wasn't entitled. She just wasn't reward based. So they could have given her 1,000,000 rewards. It wasn't her language. And so once you realize that about yourself and other people, you can start to go, okay, here's how I do this. Sometimes it can be a big long-term goal. For me, I had a book that I needed to finish. And I said to myself, when I finish this manuscript, when I turn it in, I get to buy myself a pair of ski boots. Now that was a 2-year goal. So I had time to save for them. They weren't even that expensive. I probably could have bought them the day I made the goal, but I wanted something on the finish line pulling me towards it. So sometimes it's a purchase. I heard one of the people that's in the book, his goal, he had a hot tub that he loved to use at home and it took about 15 minutes to fill up. So he decided every time I turn it on, I'll go do something for my honey to-do list. Like my wife has a list. So it takes me about 15 minutes. I'll go change the light. I'll do something. And so now he said, I can't even get in the hot tub without doing some work first because he tied that. It's like this Pavlovian thing. So the key is get as creative as you want.
I love that. I've definitely started doing that now that the stores have the Christmas tree cakes in the store. I don't let myself have a Christmas tree cake until the dishes are in the dishwasher and being run. So
Exactly. And it's not a massive thing. Like, and you're an adult, you could eat all the Christmas cakes you wanted, but it becomes a fun reward.
Okay, so you stated in order to accelerate, you have to navigate change. Do you have any advice on how to work with anybody, so maybe employees that are resistant to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes time. I keep telling people like we need gobs of grace for each other right now. Like a sentence I keep telling people to say is, this is my first global pandemic. Like it is, like we forget that. There's nobody watching this right now. It's like, no, this is like my 10th. I've done a ton of global pandemics. Once you do a couple, you're a pro at them. Remember, everyone is in the weirdest year ever. So I think one thing you do is you try to give them lots of grace, and then you try to present the positive reward of the change. People aren't afraid of change necessarily. A lot of times they're afraid of looking foolish. They know how to do the old way, and so they get really resistant. What's interesting is some of your best performers will be the most resistant to the new way because they're great at the old way. If you're terrible at the old way, you can't wait to learn the new way. But if you've got your system and your world set up, it's really hard to go over. So I think you have to give them grace to learn. And then the big thing is I keep teaching people to have the mindset of a tourist. Imagine you're a tourist. We're all tourists to this new year and this new way to do things. And what do tourists have in common? Well, they ask lots of questions. Like tourists aren't afraid to say, I don't know how to do this. They don't pretend to be experts. You don't get to learn something new if you pretend. They request help from experts. They have fun. And so I try to get people that are resistant to change and really help them understand, okay, it's going to take some time. And the other thing is people who are resistant often think they have to change everything all at once forever. They think that the things they're good at won't be used in the future. And that makes them like, then you get identity wrapped up into it and it gets really messy. So I think you need to help them see like, we're not saying change everything. These 3 things you're really good at, we're going to bring them forward. And here's how they're going to change or they're going to evolve. We're not telling you to be a different person. We're not telling you to lose every skill you've ever had. We're telling you to adapt to this new thing. And we're going to bring you along because that's where we're headed.
I love that. We've got time for one more question. So you work with lots of companies, and we know that, I think everyone has felt this, but our sense of community has definitely suffered not being in the same space and seeing each other every day. So other than in the office, how have you heard about companies that are keeping people connected and providing that sense of community, especially in times like these?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing is the leaders going first. I think people right now don't want leaders who pretend everything is the same. Like if you go, like I had a conversation with an architect firm today where they said, we're going to try to do a Christmas virtual party. And we're going to tell people it's as fun as the regular party. And I was like, don't. Your people aren't dumb. They know that a Zoom Christmas party isn't as enjoyable as a regular Christmas party. So I think as leaders, your ability to be positive and honest to go, hey, we can't wait for the next one. And also like point to the future. Like point and go like, we can't wait to be back live with you. Like I can't, like, I'm serious about that. Like being in Indianapolis with everybody from the YMCA, that was fun. Like, and I want to do that again a year from now or whenever that happens again. So I think as a leader, you have to really balance those two things. You're positive and you're encouraging and you're growing, but you're not dishonest. It's not dishonest positivity because your team can see that. And what's interesting is when you'll be human, where you'll share that and go, I'm just struggling. Like there's some days I've struggled. Like I go from everything's going to be fine to the world is ending in the same minute, like not even in the same hour, like sometimes in the same minute. That lets other people know they're not alone. Like that's the isolation. Your people are isolated physically, but they're also isolated emotionally where they think they're the only one having these feelings and they feel like a failure for having those feelings. So your ability to, as a leader to go, I'm having them too. Like I'd rather be in the same room with you guys. Like that's what I want to do. And I'm not going to pretend our Zoom party because I have a cool background is the same as being in, a hotel that gave us a room to use. Like it's not, but we're going to make the best of it. And we've got a future that we're still excited about the future. So I think that's kind of the dance.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, sometimes it may not be as fun as the in-person, but sometimes you discover something that you wouldn't have discovered otherwise. And, we work with a team that is spread out over the United States. And even situations like this, there may have been people who are attending today that wouldn't have been able to if we had an in-person conference. So potentially you could reach out and meet someone that you wouldn't have had the chance to meet if this were in person. So both,
well, and you get to see people's houses too. Like another thing that I've seen is people go, it was so fun to go, wow, look at Becky's bookshelf. She has a lot of books she's sitting in front. That's amazing. Like you get a peek into somebody's life, which is unique and special. So there's definitely good that comes out of it. I think it's just a balance.
For sure. Well, thank you so much. We also enjoyed this session. I could see people laughing and having a great time. So thank you for being with us today, and definitely check out soundtracks for text soundtracks to 44222 for the free first chapter. I know I'm going to do that when we wrap up today. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks,
As a
guys.
reminder, we have our next sessions are our breakout sessions for the afternoon. So I will pull our schedule back up here. Let's see. Definitely post any great takeaway that you had from this session. Feel free to post it on the live feed. So the afternoon sessions that we've got, we just wrapped up Beyond the Pivot with John Acuff. We've got session A is grow and retain revenue. So we know every dollar counts at your organization. So we'll look at some ways to grow and retain your revenue. And then the concurrent session to that is increase efficiencies. So making sure that you're minimizing your administrative work so you can get back to focusing on your members. And then immediately after that, we'll have our round of 3 SOP workshops. So you can choose from any one of those workshops you want to attend, establishing SOPs, learning more about the system rundown, or training staff. And then we will wrap up the day. We'll meet back together here to close things out. But check out those afternoon breakout sessions. We are excited to be in there with you, and we will see you there in just a minute.
One note, technology note, I keep popping in with the technology notes. You might have noticed that the links are no longer listed under the actual breakout sessions. That is intentional. It got a little bit convoluted in listing them in multiple places. So under the full schedule, you'll see which room it's in, but then to access the link, you will go to the homepage. So I'll pull it up real quick just to show you an example of that, and then I will send you off. But so if you were to look here under the schedule, full schedule, the location is the Accelerate Breakout Room 1, for example, and then you would go back to the home page and see Accelerate Breakout Room 1. So you'll be accessing those links on the home page from here on out. If you have any issues, let us know and we can get you connected. But if not, we'll see you there shortly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christy. And yes, we will have, yes, if you are busy this afternoon, we are recording these sessions. So they will be recorded and sent out later. Just in case you've got to run to a meeting or something, we are recording them, but definitely chance to ask questions, chance to, I know in the SOP workshop, Heather is asking you to come with your SOP that you want to work on. So lots of opportunities for for this great interaction, even though it's not as great as in person, but still live interaction with our team. So I'm happy to send out the recordings, but if you're able to, we definitely appreciate you sticking with us live. So thank you, and we'll see you guys in a minute.